Well, thank you for joining me on this penultimate question of the entire first part of the second part of the Summa Theologica, Prima Secunda. And with this, we are getting very close to the midpoint of the Summa Theologica. Now, just real quickly, I'll tell you that we're going to do the effects of grace today, and then the next video will be about merit, which is a very important and interesting series of 10 articles in the Summa. And then we'll be finished with Prima Secunda, and I'm going to take an intermission, a little bit of a break. I don't know if it's going to be a couple of weeks or a month or what, before starting Secunda Secundae, which will be the third part of the Summa, and then Tertia Pars will be the final part, and I don't know how long it's going to take me to finish it all together, but thank you again for watching these videos. I don't know if anybody has watched all of them, but the plan all along has been to go through the entire Summa Theologica, and then I'm going to erase them all, and I'm going to do it again. Okay, and I'm assuming that the second time I do it will be a lot better and more professional, and this is really a run-through. Okay, so anyways, if you're getting anything out of this, awesome. Question 113 has 10 articles. It's kind of long, but I think this is very interesting. It's very foundational because without grace, without that participation in the life of God, we're not going to be able to get to heaven. We're not going to be able to be justified. And so these 10 articles are very important. The first one says whether the justification of the ungodly is the remission of sins. Okay, so here he's talking about justification, justice, and he says justice may be taken in two ways. First, inasmuch as it implies a right order in man's act, and thus justice is placed among the virtues. But he's going to go on and say that's not really what we're talking about here when we're talking about the justification of the ungodly. He says justice may be brought about in man by a movement from one contrary to another, and thus justification implies a transmutation from the state of injustice to the aforesaid state of justice, and is thus that we are speaking of the justification of the ungodly. Okay, so it's not just being just, it's not just practicing virtue, it's changing from one state to another, going from ungodly to godly. Okay, that's what he's talking about here when he talks about grace. Article 2, whether the infusion of grace is required for the remission of guilt, for the justification of the ungodly, and you probably can imagine that this is going to be a big yes. He says, by sinning, man offends God. Now, an offense is remitted to anyone only when the soul of the offender is at peace with the offended. Hence, sin is remitted to us when God is at peace with us. And this peace consists in the love whereby God loves us. Now, the effect of divine love in us, which is taken away by sin, is grace, whereby a man is made worthy of eternal life, from which sin shuts him out. Hence, we could not conceive the remission of guilt without the infusion of grace. Very, very important. Okay, so for the justification of the ungodly, for a man to be justified, grace has to be infused. Now, as you read these articles, as we study these, you can kind of see that the whole Protestant Reformation, which was partially, because Luther and some of the other original Protestants believed that the Catholic Church got this whole issue of justification wrong. Just look how much St. Thomas Aquinas, who came before Luther, emphasizes grace. Grace, it's entirely important, and it's, as you can see from all these questions we've been doing the last couple of days. Okay, Article 3, whether for the justification of the ungodly is required a movement of free will. Now, this is really interesting because it has to do with the nature, man's nature. It says the justification of the ungodly is brought about by God moving man to justice. Now, that sounds kind of predestination-ish, that God is just moving us. But it says God moves everything in its own manner. Hence, he moves man to justice according to the condition of his human nature. But it is man's proper nature to have free will. Hence, in him who has the use of reason, God's motion to justice does not take place without a motion of free will. But he so infuses the gift of justifying grace that at the same time he moves the free will to accept the gift of grace and is in such as are capable of being moved thus. That's kind of interesting, because now he's talking about moving us to to our free will. And so there's a tension there. And there always is. Whenever I study St. Thomas Aquinas, I see this tension between God's grace and our free will. But again, he's very, very explicit here that God only moves us according to our nature, and our nature has free will. Whether a movement of faith is required for the justification of the ungodly, a movement of free will is required for the justification of the ungodly, inasmuch as man's mind is moved by God. Okay, interesting wording there. Man's mind is moved by God. Now, God moves man's soul by turning it to himself. Hence, for the justification of the ungodly, a movement of the mind is required by which it is turned to God. And the first turning to God is by faith. So yes, faith is necessary for the justification of the ungodly. Article 5, whether for the justification of the ungodly there is required a movement of the free will towards sin. Now that's an interesting way of wording it. It doesn't mean towards sin as in you're moving, towards it. It means in relation to sin. He says the justification of the ungodly is a certain movement whereby the human mind is moved by God from the state of sin to the state of justice. Hence it is necessary for the human mind to regard both extremes by an act of free will. Now, to withdraw from sin and to draw near to justice as an act of free will means detestation and desire. You must detest one thing and desire another. That's very important. Hence, in the justification of the ungodly, there must be two acts of the free will, one whereby it tends to God's justice, the other whereby it hates sin. I love that language there. Article 6, whether the remission of sin ought to be reckoned among the things required for justification, the remission of sin. He said there are four things which are accounted to be necessary for the justification of the ungodly. The infusion of grace. Now notice that's mentioned first, the infusion of grace, because that's going to come up here in a moment. The movement of the free will towards God by faith, the movement of the free will towards sin, which means away from sin, and the remission of sins. Now, in the movement whereby one thing is moved by another, three things are required. First, the motion of the mover. Secondly, the movement of the moved. Thirdly, the consummation of the movement, or the attainment of the end. On the part of divine motion, there is the infusion of grace. Okay, that's first. On the part of the free will, which is moved, there are two movements. Of departure from whence, okay, so departure from sin and approach whereto, but the consummation of the movement or the attainment of the end of the movement is implied in the remission of sins, for this is the justification of the ungodly completed. Okay, so that's what happens is you have remission of sins. Does the justification of the ungodly take place in an instant or successively? And I'm not going to go into all the explanation here, but St. Thomas Aquinas says because God's power is infinite, he moves things instantly. But he does, interestingly, make an exception here. He says, we see that the stronger the agent, the more speedily is the matter disposed. Therefore, since the divine power is infinite, it can suddenly dispose any matter whatsoever to its form, and much more man's free will, whose movement is by nature instantaneous. Therefore, justification of the ungodly by God takes place in an instant. Okay, I thought there was something about St. Paul here, but I think that's okay. That's going to come. That's going to come in another article. Whether the infusion of grace is naturally the first of the things required for the justification of the ungodly. Remember a moment ago he was showing the order, and the very first thing was the infusion of grace. So yes, that's the first thing. Whether the justification of the ungodly is God's greatest work. Interesting. He's going to compare this, as Augustine did, to the creation of the world. What is the greatest work? God creating the world or God justifying the ungodly? And he says here that a work may be called great in two ways. First, on the part of the mode of the action, and thus the work of creation is the greatest work, wherein something is made from nothing. Okay, ex nihilo, as we say. Secondly, a work may be called great on account of what is made, and thus the justification of the ungodly, which terminates at the eternal good of a share of the Godhead, is greater than the creation of heaven and earth, which terminates at the good of mutable nature. Okay, I really think that's interesting. Whether the justification of the godly is a miraculous work. Okay, here's where he's going to bring in St. Paul. He says, miraculous works are, okay, this has to do with human nature again. In certain miraculous works, it is found the form introduced is beyond the natural power of such matter as in the resurrection of the dead. Life is above the natural power of such a body. And thus the justification of the ungodly is not miraculous because the soul is naturally capable of grace. That's very important. The soul is naturally capable of grace. A dog or a goldfish or a butterfly is not naturally capable of grace, since from its having been made to the likeness of God, it is fit to receive God by grace. Yet, sometimes God moves the soul so vehemently that it reaches the perfection of justice at once, as took place in the conversion of Paul, which was accompanied at the same time by a miraculous external prostration. Hence, the conversion of St. Paul is commemorated in the church as miraculous. All right. I find these really interesting articles. I hope you enjoyed that. That's the effects of grace. That's the penultimate, second to last question of the Prima Secunda of the Summa Theologica. We've got one more question next on merit and then the intermission. And so thank you again for joining me. I hope you're enjoying this, and we'll have our final video of Prima Secunda next.